The measles are on the rise nationwide, and that is prompting people to take a look at vaccinations and whether school kids should have to get them. The head of the FDA just spoke with CNN about this and blamed some states' widespread exemptions are creating the opportunity for these outbreaks. He also said one day the federal government might have to step in and regulate vaccination policies. Lauren is taking a deeper look into Minnesota's immunization laws and exemptions. What have you found, Lauren?
Well, it's interesting. The immunization laws, they vary from state to state. So right now, here in Minnesota, the State Department of Health's website says in order for a child to enroll in child care, early education programs, or school, a parent must show that they've received immunizations or an exemption using that form. But in Minnesota, there are two exceptions here. The first, a medical exemption. Now, if there's proof that the child's already immune to certain diseases or they have a statement from their health care provider, they might not have to get vaccinated. Second, this one is more interesting, a non-medical exemption. This one based solely on the parent or guardian's beliefs. Now, the child would be exempt from immunization requirements. So we did take a look at this map. We found that the CDC shows vaccination coverage among kids in kindergarten from last school year. And here in Minnesota, more than 92% of kids were vaccinated. You can see it's almost 92% in Wisconsin, too. Minnesota is going to go a step further, though, in educating the public about immunizations. The Star Tribune reports Representative Mike Freiberg of Golden Valley did introduce a bill that would establish a 2-year grant to support outreach about vaccines' value. There's no funding amount designated, but according to the paper, health experts say less than $1 million could fund that entire initiative. And it's so important, these vaccines. They're going down around the country, and there's these pockets where the vaccination rates are really going down.
Yeah, that's a surprising fact considering, what we know, but apparently not everybody buys into that.